Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Tom's Take. Of course, we have Tom, our food service coordinator here, and we have special guest Najee Brown. Tom, as you know, owned Atlantic Video, which specialized in independent film in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Najee Brown is a playwright, author, actor, singer, dancer, and also artist in residence here at Green Acre. Today we're going to continue our exploration of resilience through three films. These three films, though, are rooted in stories of Black culture. It also deals with people on the margins and what it takes to be resilient under those circumstances. And the three films we're going to talk about today are All the Way, Queen of Katwe, and The Last Black Man in San Francisco.
Okay, so All the Way is a movie about the presidency of Lyndon B. Johnson. And it's really about the passing of the Civil Rights Bill that Kennedy started, but that LBJ definitely finished and knew that this would be a large part of his legacy. The strong plot of the film is this relationship that Lyndon B. Johnson has with Dr. Martin Luther King. And the work that they're doing through the Democratic Party to literally change this Democratic Party, which was a big racist party at the time, to a civil rights party. I particularly loved Anthony Mackie's version of Martin Luther King. I thought it was the best. You got to see more of the political side of King in this film.
I need to be able to go back to my people and tell them that this president is committed to civil rights and that this bill, even without voting rights, will still be a strong bill with no further changes. If I can't do that, I'll lose their faith. And in their despair, I don't know what'll happen.
Is that a threat?
I don't want riots any more than you do. But in order to avoid that type of situation, I need to be able to deliver meaningful reform.
Bryan Cranston's version of LBJ, amazing.
If you watch the real Lyndon Baines Johnson, he nailed it. It's like there's very little. I mean, of all the interpretations people have done of historic characters, this is probably one of the most accurate you'll ever see, I think.
Which is deeply troubling.
Edgar, I hate to interrupt, but they're pulling me 6 ways from Sunday. I'm interested in this, and we'll talk soon, I promise. That man's obsessed. All right, Manny, let's just get this over with. What? What is it?
Catherine Graham of the Washington Post is on 2.
What?
And Dr. King is still on 3.
Look, I don't need to be reminded of what I already know. God damn it. You're fired. Go on, get the hell out of here. Walter, give me another secretary knows what she's doing.
It's kind of amazing that period, too, how much incredible cultural changes were going on at very short
same time.
To also show how politics does work behind the scenes. Sometimes people think it's kind of boring or dry, but it is interesting, the personalities that clash and the compromises that have to be made. So yeah, it's a good movie. It's funny, it's also have these movies that are set 50 plus years ago can become very timely.
What makes this film so timely for now?
I mean, right now you have the Black Lives Matter movement. You had the Civil Rights movement back then. And just seeing how King strategically worked with the government to get what he needed to get done. You had to come to a common agreement and say, you know what, this is better for the people.
Yeah. You could be cordial to someone who you might be your views might be diametrically opposed to, but you were able to be civil towards them. So it's interesting because today there's, in the Senate, for instance, there's much more contention than there was back then.
He knew that the world was changing quickly. He wanted to be named in history as the man that made this change happen. And he did it. Martin Luther King, knowing that he was working with the pride of a very strong, prideful man, used that to his advantage.
LBJ came from a pretty impoverished background himself. He knew some pretty hard times growing up. And he also, as a young man, he was a school teacher in a school that was primarily young Mexican-American kids. And he saw the racism firsthand. And there was some famous line he had about he'd see these young kids, their bright eyes, and he said that he'd watch their eyes dim when they realized that, you know, the system was against them. They didn't have a chance. And so I think that was a real epiphany for him about what racism does to people.
Okay, why don't we jump into the synopsis of The Queen of Katwe?
The original source of this movie was a magazine article for ESPN. The story that he wrote about, she was actually, I think, 8 years old, but she was a chess phenom. The writer also pointed out that if you're African, you're kind of an underdog. And if Uganda is one of the poorest countries in Africa, so you're an underdog in Africa. And this was the slum of Kampala, so you're even an underdog there. And on top of that, the character was female. So it was like, so there were a lot of odds. The odds were very much against her. She just sort of accidentally stumbles on chess, that this social worker who runs a church-run youth center uses chess as a way to get kids involved in critical thinking and strategy and resilience too, just determination, how it can bring life lessons to these kids.
No, Fiona, never tip your king so quick, eh?
Why not? When you're going to be beaten anyway.
Focus on what you have.
Coach, I think you don't come from here.
When I was a child, my mother left me. In that moment, I wanted to die. But it is a good thing I did not take my life, eh? Otherwise, I would not have seen my daughter. I would not have met the pioneers. Or you.
Me?
Do not be quick to tip your king, Fiona. You must never surrender.
That's an interesting role that I've seen. I've never seen a black man. I've never seen a black man. Like, I've never seen that role, that type of role played by a black man before. That nourishing, soft, home, like it was beautiful. But I also think there's a thing there about taking chances and being fearless. And that's what I walked away with, taking chances and being fearless. The fear of the unknown, the fear of not thinking that you're good enough. Understanding that if you have the talent and if you have the ability, you belong there.
You could be the best in all Uganda. Do you know what that would mean for Katwe? Perhaps one day an international champion.
Coach, why are you shining me?
Me, I'm not shining you. Only champions can see that many variations. What is preventing you from being a grandmaster?
I do not know about being a grandmaster.
Sometimes the place you are used to is not the place you belong. You belong where you believe you belong. Where is that for you, Fiona?
And this is a true story. To see a black man in that situation was very, very inspiring. And it was amazing. I thought the film was amazing for that. Just their depiction of this black male.
He saw this talent in her, and he took her under his wing, and she blossomed into a competitive chess player who was able to represent Africa in a world meet. But it was primarily all boys, and so she shows up there and is taking on these young boys who, of course, aren't too keen about being beaten. It's very, very well done, inspiring, and true.
All right, last but not least, the last black man in San Francisco.
So the movie is about two characters, Jimmy and Mott. They both live at Mott's grandfather's house, who's played by Danny Glover. But when there's a death in the family, this house basically becomes vacant, and these two gentlemen begin living in it. Jimmy is in love with this house.
Yeah, the house itself is like a character in the movie too. And yeah, when the two of them are in that house, you know it's not gonna. You know this is not gonna. This is going to end. But they're in that house, and it's just like, you know that they're living this dream, but you know it's just a dream.
He would have done everything. He would have worked like a slave to just live in this house. And the real question came from like his aunt, when his aunt asked him like, hey, do you really want to fight for this? I'm letting you know, if you don't get this house, this will be a loss to San Francisco, not a loss to you.
You know, of course, it's this beautiful old Victorian home in San Francisco, which I wouldn't even want to guess how much that'd be worth today, but it would be something staggering, you know, so way beyond what we could conceive. But it was in the Fillmore district, which was a historically Black part of San Francisco, which was a very vibrant. There was a big jazz scene there in the 40s and 50s. It was and slowly it was chipped away. There was a huge urban renewal project there in the 70s that tore a lot of homes down, and then economic pressures forced other people out of the neighborhood. So today there's very little of the original neighborhood left. All the characters are resilient because they sort of have to be, like in Queen of Katwe, the slums of Kampala. Like not everybody gets to be a chess player, but just to go through their days and get on to the next day requires resiliency. So it's not like a unique talent some of us have. Sort of, we all have it to some degree, and some have to exhibit it more than others.
I connected with this film personally. The first time I watched it, I didn't like it. I was like, what is this? But I just realized that I needed to give it a second look in order to do this review. I fell in love with it, and I was emotionally connected to it as a Black man moving from Brooklyn to Maine. And for the first time ever, having space. This idea of space for Black people who've always had to live in these tight, confined places.
You don't read the paper, Jimmy.
Because I never had a home to read it in. We could yell.
Neighbors, Jimmy.
Oh, the neighbors? I got neighbors now.
There was a lot of moments of screaming. There was a lot of moments of crying. And as a theater person, I looked at it and I was like, wow, that's symbolic of all the sounds that Black men are not able to make throughout their lives. The screaming, the crying, the yelling, and just this idea of what will happen. Black people are almost like caged birds. But what will happen if we were actually, the cage was open and we realized that the cage was open and we were able to roam free, and how the trap of ownership can limit your mind to the endless possibilities that we as Black people need to sometimes be set free from. We need to see the whole world as ours.
So let's start with All the Way. Out of a 5-star rating, what's your take, Najee?
I'll give it 4 stars. It wasn't visually stunning, but the dialogue and the history was there. I definitely will recommend it. I've watched it 2 or 3 times so far. I enjoyed it every time, just simply for the history and the information that is there and how it relates to today.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, if it's on a 5-star basis, a 4, because it's as a movie, it's not like anything probably highly memorable as a film. There's a certain kind of formula to it, but the acting, but particularly Bryan Cranston and Anthony Mackie, all the actors in it are very good. All the acting is very first rate, but particularly the Bryan Cranston bringing LBJ to life the way he did was pretty amazing.
All right, gentlemen, give us a review for the Queen of Katwe.
That I would say probably a 4 also. It's in some ways fairly conventional as far as the way it's told, but the acting is all it's very good, but very real. Well, and it's also, I think, a very good family movie. It would be inspirational, especially to, I think, young girls.
I would give it a 4. I love the beautiful, vibrant African culture with the music and the streets, and the fact that there was you got to see what an African city looks like, and that was gorgeous. It's a great story. It could have been a greater story if they talked a little bit more about the harsh conditions that these people were coming from. But you can't do that in a kids movie, you know? Yeah, you really can't.
All right, last but not least, The Last Black Man in San Francisco. We'll start with you, Najee.
I'll give it a 4.5. And the reason why I'll give it a 4.5 is simply because I'm a writer and I like dialogue. And I'm waiting for the day where a movie that visually stunning can also have the rich dialogue that I'm longing for. Art films, independent films are very interesting. I kind of wish there was another version of this film that gave it to you just straight, without the art stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. There was so many different types of Black men in that film. There was no two characters were the same. And I love that. I love diversity in Black people, and it showed a lot of diversity. It was very realistic for me.
Yeah, I think I would give it 4 stars, but I can understand why Najee gave it 4.5. It does have a great universe of characters, and particularly the friendship between the two lead characters is, Najee was saying, it's kind of unique that it shows the sensitivity and vulnerability of these two men who have this strong bond with each other. I also like the fact that it's dealing with this situation of gentrification is happening right around here, happens everywhere in the United States or around the world. It's not usually the focal point of film, so I appreciate that aspect of it.
And again, thanks guys for sharing, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Tom's Take 3.
Thank you for having me.